Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain was born on September 8, 1838 in Brewer, Maine. At an early age, he showed incredible character and commitment, teaching himself Greek by the age of 14 and demonstrating a real propensity for the classics. After graduating from Bowdoin College in 1852 and then Bangor Theological Seminary in 1855, he went on to become fluent in 7 languages, eventually returning to Bowdoin as a professor. Yet as Chamberlain settled in at Bowdoin, trouble was soon to follow. After the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, it was clear that the nation's wounds were not easily bound. Slavery was literally tearing the nation apart. Northern abolitionists were clearly in no mood to accept the expansion of this horrific and culturally debilitating institution. Flamed by John Brown's raid, Lincoln's election led to the first act of rebellion when Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor was fired upon. Lincoln called up 80,000 troops in the states that had remained loyal to the Union. Throughout the northern states, the call to arms was sent out. Literally thousands volunteered to serve the Union. From farms in rural upstate New York to the big cities of the Northeast, the call was answered by men of all ages, ethnicities, and occupations. The raw recruits quickly adjusted to camp life. Training was often rushed and rudimentary, as there were few veteran officers and NCOs to lead these men in the early months. Soldiers were paid a meager wage and were forced to assume roles that they were not all that familiar with, nor inclined to pursue in civilian life. Some officers, like George Armstrong Custer, enthusiastically embraced the conflict as a way of advancing their careers through glorious deeds on the battlefield. Others dedicated their lives to helping the sick and injured, as new weaponry unleashed challenges that had never before been witnessed on the battlefield. The first 2 years of the war led to endless carnage. Casualty rates were severe on both sides, and the initial battles in Virginia included devastating defeats for the North. Names like Manassas or Bull Run, Fredericksburg, and Chancellorsville led some Northerners to conclude that the carnage was simply not worth it. Heroic civilians like Sarah Barton, who founded the American Red Cross, proved to be adept innovators in a time when 19th century medical practices were severely inept in dealing with the countless maimed and wounded. Heroic deeds were in no short supply as America witnessed a war where age was no barrier. Men and women from both North and South were locked into one of the most tragic conflicts in American history. Yet Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, having witnessed firsthand the ravages of war at Fredericksburg, continued to mature as a military officer of the highest caliber, applying the discipline that he had learned in academia to the battlefield. On July 2, 1863, in the small Pennsylvania town of Gettysburg, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain would be put to the ultimate test, as superior officers of the Union Army became aware that the extreme left flank of the Union lines were completely exposed and susceptible to a Confederate flanking maneuver. For Colonel Chamberlain, this was the ultimate test of character. He had given up an illustrious career to fight with the 20th Maine. He had left the love of his life, his wife Fanny, back in Maine. He now faced the possibility of paying the ultimate sacrifice for his beliefs, that is, preserving the Union and the eradication of slavery.